called Lean Discovery and Inception. My name's Scott. I'll introduce myself a little better in just a moment. First, a couple quick business things. I'm going to put Kim on the spot, but this is a really cool thing. How many of you have ever seen the cool Daniel Pink sketch note talk? That's like an Agile staple. So she's going to do that. I've never been sketch noted before. That's a little intimidating. I hope it's cool. So that's neat. And then also, I'm with Veracity Solutions. We're a consulting firm that works with technology companies. We are actually giving away one of these Inception experiences if you are interested. And if you'd like to win that, there's a guy in the back with a blue shirt holding up a little cubby. Feel free to put your business card in there. That's worth anywhere from $15,000 to $25,000, depending on how much we do and all of that. So hopefully that's the end of my sales pitch. We've got some Veracity stuff up here during Q&A if you want to, ask questions. I've heard there was interest in these Magic 8 balls. So if you really want a Magic 8 ball, you might want to ask some questions. And then you'll have a Magic 8 ball to ask questions on too. So, all right. Well, thanks for coming this morning. Clearly, this is a popular topic. And as I've had a chance to meet speakers yesterday and last night and talk with some of you this morning, this is a topic that seems to resonate. We're also going to talk about some things like prototyping and a little bit of design thinking, not in depth, but you will find other sessions here, including one that's happening right now. I met Ron at dinner last night at the speakers dinner. And he works with SaaS, and he's giving a topic right now, talking about innovation and UX and things like that. So this is a hot topic. Please don't get up and go to his presentation right now. I don't know, feel free in the middle. But anyway, so as I said, my name's Scott. I work with Veracity Solutions, and I've been doing technology for years. I think I was about 14 when one of my older brothers built a computer. He's one of those hardware guys, and it stuck. Boy, that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. I couldn't stop playing with it. I was a total nerd in junior high, but it served me well in my career. I bumped into Agile in about 2001, right around the time the manifesto was signed. And I was working as a software developer, and I'd been doing it enough that I had a lot of ideas in my head of what worked well and how teams worked. And so when I read the Agile manifesto, it just resonated. It was like somebody had taken a lot of ideas and stuff that I'd kind of come to on my own and improved them and organized them and codified them and said, this is a good way to develop software. So it just made sense to me. And then I've also had the joy of being part of a number of high-performing Agile teams. And for me, that has been fulfilling. So, in Gil's talk that he just gave in the keynote, he talks about passing on things that you believe. And I have come to believe, in fact, I'll tell you what I wrote down. I wrote down, I value helping teams work together better because I believe performing teams have more fun and fulfillment. So I want to pass on principles that I found effective. So who's been a part of a well-performing Agile team? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about, that sweet spot when teams start to really nail it and perform well. A little bit of a roadmap for today. I want to share something that has helped us at Veracity, something that we have come to believe over the years. No, this is a thing. There's actually a need, and it has been helpful. Now that said, this experience that we do is typically over 2 days, and so in about 25 minutes, I'm going to try to give you enough of an overview, enough of a taste and some tangible things that you could actually go and try this and get started on your own. Now, because of that, I've got some slides that are really wordy. In fact, I'm going to put them up here and you're going to go, I don't want to read that. The reason I did that is because those are in the PDF that you can download from TriAgile. And I don't know how to do that. I haven't sleuthed that out yet. But if you can't find it there, grab a business card, get my email, ping me. I will send you a PDF of this. And hopefully that will give you enough detail that you could get started. At the same time, if you want to go deeper, you're going to have to put some effort into it. So you'll have to do some homework on your own. I've tried to give some links and some ideas. And then if you really want to go deeper, talk to me, talk to any of our folks from Veracity. We'd love to talk about helping you with that. Let's see, I made some last minute notes here. That's what I'm looking at. I made some assumptions this morning that this is an Agile crowd. That's probably safe, right? And so there's a lot of things that I'm assuming you're familiar with in terms of basic Agile concepts like release planning and how you might do those kinds of exercises. I'm not here to teach you those kinds of things. If you don't know that, there's enough coaches in the room that you could probably turn to your right or your left and somebody could teach you how to do that kind of stuff, okay? So I'm going to try and stay high level, but there are two needs that, well, actually, before I go there, let me just come back to this roadmap. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is this Inception thing, why would I use it? We're going to do a high-level flyby of the basic pieces, hopefully with enough nuggets that you can grab onto on your own. And then I think the highlight of the presentation will be about halfway. We're going to dig into a real-world case study, and I've actually got Chad from one of our clients who I'm going to introduce you to later on. And Chad and I are going to talk through an experience that his company, Lumeris, had just about a month ago. And Chad leads their Agile Center of Excellence. And so he's going to share some in the wild observations and ideas about this Inception thing. All right, so let's dig in. How many of you have ever either had this question or been asked this question? Should we really build this? Now, if you're on the product side or if you're an entrepreneur, that's where you live, right? In fact, how many product people in the room? Wow, a lot, okay. How many technology or developer people in the room? Okay, cool, so it's kind of a good mix. This is good. So if you're on that side of the world, the product side of the world, this is kind of where you live. Should we really build this? If you're on the technology side, you might relate more to this and that guy right there, right? It seems like sometimes if you're on the development side, you're pretty much told what you need to do. And, you know, part of that is our job because the business is our customer, right? And so we're trying to collaborate and work together. But even if you're told what to do, it's good to pause and evaluate things so that you maximize your probability of success. So this idea for this Inception that we do at Veracity came from almost 20 years of having clients come to us and ask questions like this. Basically, two needs that we hear from clients. The need to discover, what is it should we build, what's the right thing to build, is this really a need, and the need for estimation. Now, saying the word estimation in front of an Agile crowd is a little scary for me, I have to confess. Because typically, we don't try to drill all the way down to like timelines and budgets and whatever. It feels dangerous, it feels edgy, so embrace the edginess this morning with me and go there, suspend disbelief. We've got a system, it is by no means a silver bullet, so please, this is just an idea that we have found to work effectively and our clients have found value in it. So let's, high level, what is an Agile Inception? Many of you probably do things like release planning. If you're doing SAFe, you do PI planning. You might do a sprint zero. And Agile processes based on things like flow theory and theory of constraints are an efficient way to get things done. It's a great way to get a group of people performing well together, communicating, collaborating. Release planning and sprint zero set groundwork for a team to get started well, to know, okay, what are the boxes we need to check? What are the next steps? So we often set about and we build a release plan, which helps us with scoping of, okay, what is it we're going to do in this release? And then we prioritize, we organize our backlog, and that tells us what we're going to build first. And then we take some time and say, okay, what do we need to get started? We're going to lay the groundwork, we're going to form the team, we're going to get all our frameworks together and get our code libraries built, and we fire the gun and we run. This idea of an Agile Inception steps back a notch from that and says, we need to discover some things, we need to gather data, and we need to evaluate scope and risk. And then we want to make some well-informed decisions and maybe some well-informed estimates if that's a need a business has. And so we're asking things like, how big is the elephant, right? If you're going to eat an elephant, one bite at a time, so that lives in the world of estimation. What's our probability of success? Do we have the right team? Do we have enough time? Do we have enough budget? That's more in the realm of managing risk. And then if you're on the business side, once you get some of those answers, you need to step back and say, well, is this even worth doing? This is going to be twice as much as we thought it was going to be, or it's going to take twice as long. Or in the other direction, you know what, we can nail this thing quickly. Yeah, slam dunk, let's go do it. So what we call an Agile Inception tries to answer these questions. And then over the years, we've also come to add on a thing that we have called the Lean Inception, which deals more in the innovation space. This is more of the should we build this, and what is the thing we should build even? Do we really understand the problem? What do our users really want? What is this thing that we should build? You might do an inception when you are making a business plan for something new. You might do it when you're a product person and you need to prioritize your product budget and decide what is most important to build now for the market. You might do it on the technology side when you are told you need to build something, but you've got to evaluate your options. You've got a limited budget. You've got a limited team. You need to decide whether you need to go find some help. Maybe you outsource some things. You might do this when you're kickstarting a new team. We did this at Chad's company when we kickstarted a brand new team that we had our PI boundaries, and about a month before the program increment started, we formed a team and we spent a couple days doing an inception, and then the team jumped into what would have been probably like sprint zero activities. And by the time the PI planning event came around, they were ready to hit the ground running. So we had this brand new idea that really hadn't been fleshed out very well, but by the time we got to PI planning, they were able to come into a planning session, interact with other teams, identify dependencies, and be rolling. So they weren't doing all of that during planning. So it was kind of an upstream event. This can also help you validate if you have the right team to build what you're trying to build. One more note there. One of the things that, it's one of those subtle things that, Agile brings a lot of subtle cultural issues, or not issues, cultural benefits, that's the word, a lot better than issues. It brings issues too, right, definitely. But one of the cool things about this is that we find this process often creates a great conversation between the players in the business and the technology side, because everyone comes to the table and is part of the process. I know that there are a number of ceremonies in Agile that are designed to do that. Many of them work well. Some of them, like we just heard from Gil, the daily stand-up. How many of us have been in really poor daily stand-ups? And it's not the fault of the process, right? But you're changing mindsets. There's something about this inception process of getting everybody in the room and getting everybody talking that really tends to break down barriers and create quick cohesiveness in the business. We'll tell this story a little bit later when we talk with Chad, but I watched a team, well, you could loosely define a group of individuals enter a room with a number of different agendas and different goals and skepticism and lack of trust. And after 2.5 days, they were working as a team, both business and technology. Trust had begun to be built because they'd solved the problems together. They'd talked through it. So that's one of those values that we see in this process. So let me shift gears. Software development can be hard. And sometimes if you don't know what you're building, it's even harder. So I would say the project that you're doing, how much of it is uncertain? How much of it is unknown? If you are just reworking a legacy product and building vNext, you might be over on this side, and you might say, well, no, we've got this. We know 95% of what we need to do. We've done this before. We've built all the core algorithms. It feels pretty comfortable. However, if you're building, you've got an idea for an app, you're not even sure if the market wants it. You've got an idea for a solution. Does the problem even really need to be solved? You're more over in this space where you can't really see what the features are. You think it's a good thing. And so there's the cone of uncertainty, as Steve McConnell calls it, if you've read his project management books, where you kind of have to get to a certain point of known, sometimes even before you can get started. Certainly out here, you can't do a lot of estimation intelligently. It's pretty challenging. It's hard to even get started in Agile here because where's your backlog coming from? How do you know what to even start on? So with that in mind, if we're honest with ourselves, I think what we've found over the years is that if we just jump in over in this space with traditional Agile planning and processes, we thrash a lot. There's a lot of waste. I've watched Agile teams burn lots of time, lots of sprints, and thousands of dollars in this space because we're taking a process that's designed to work efficiently, and we're doing lots of efficient work, but we don't know what we're supposed to be working on necessarily. So that's where this idea of a lean start comes in. And what we propose is that the more you move in this direction, the more you should spend some time doing some lean prototyping or rapid prototyping. And then as you gradually begin to learn, then you can layer in some Agile planning. So that's why we have come to have the two perspectives of an Agile inception, but if there's a lot of unknown and a lot of ambiguity, we would put a lean inception in front of it. And a lean inception is actually fairly simple. It's basically a time-boxed rapid prototyping session. And I'll talk more about rapid prototyping in just a minute. But basically it's spending some time up front to specifically focus on innovation and discovery before you start your plan. Now, rapid prototyping, again, you can find lots of material on this. I think a simple definition is one that I found that I put up here. A method of testing new ideas that decreases development time and cost by prioritizing early user feedback. So basically, it's a frame, build, measure, and learn cycle. And you're gonna march around that cycle a number of times. One of the great examples that I saw of this is from a guy named Tom Chi. Who's heard of Tom Chi? Has anybody, who's watched his Google Glass rapid prototyping talk? Anyone? Okay, one person. I'm surprised it's not more, but that's good because you guys get to discover something. So Tom Chi led the user experience team at Google X, which created Google Glass. As I was rehearsing, I realized that's really hard to say. It's like Google Glass is what comes out. But we may have our varying opinions on whether that product was successful in the market, but nonetheless, they solved some really innovative, they solved some challenges for wearable technology in innovative ways. If you will go out and search on rapid prototyping Google Glass, you will find a TED Talk that Tom Chi gave in 2012. It's about 8 minutes long, so I didn't want to show it this morning in the interest of time. But it's fascinating because one of the first questions he asks is, well, how long, and he's talking to a group of students, and he says, how long do you think it would take to prototype the actual experience of a wearable heads-up display? Give me a number, somebody.
1 hour.
Oh, ooh, okay. You're an optimist. Okay. The kids, you get extra. I should give you an 8-ball, but in fact, I will. Let's see here. So the kids in the presentation said things like a year, 6 months. And actually, it was a matter of hours. And then he says, now, what about the idea of, kind of the Tom Cruise Minority Report experience where you're gesturing and you're moving things on the screen? How long do you think that would take? And now the kids are like, 4 days, whatever. And it was like 45 minutes. And then he tells this fascinating story of how they did that with really crude mock-ups. Basically, they got a backpack, put a laptop in it, got some coat hanger wire and a set of mirrors and a piece of glass, and you wore this contraption. And obviously, strictly a mock-up, right? But it gave the user experience of walking around with this display that you could actually see through. And then to do the gesturing part, they got a series of pulleys and like a blackboard stand that they hung the pulleys on, and some chopsticks and hairbands and a mouse clicker that they put on the floor, and now by gesturing, you could click the mouse back and forward. Now that sounds silly, but they learned from it. One of the things that they learned was having the heads-up display here was not a good idea because you walked around and bumped into things. But they also realized that this is really weird, right? That if you're walking around doing this, people stare at you funny. And your arms get tired. So the point of all of this is this rapid prototyping idea. And so I encourage you to go out and watch that video. There's lots more on rapid prototyping. There's some books here that you can learn from. But the principle is frame and ideate on a problem, build something. And if it's something tangible, a real-world mock-up, pulleys and wires and stuff, that's good. Give the user the experience. It's got to be an experience. Measure their response, and then learn from it and go back and do it again. So at its core, this rapid prototyping idea is the solution to dig in and begin to figure out what you need to build. And if you do this cycle, you will begin to quickly gather data. Let me give you some tips on doing this. I would say I wouldn't plan on doing more than a couple of weeks of this. You can easily get bogged down here because it's really fun, and you could prototype till the cows come home, right? But I would say do it in little bites, take stock, figure out where you're at. Focus on rapid iteration. I've done this with developers, and developers love detail, and I am one, so I have to fight it in myself. And so you really need to focus on less time thinking and more time building, because your tendency is to, in fact, we heard it in there, build it right the first time, right? That's stuck in a lot of our minds. Stop thinking about building it right. Just build something and get feedback. Have fun with this. It's a ton of fun. At Veracity, we have an annual event where we bring all our consultants together in Salt Lake City. And we've done a couple of these exercises. It's a blast. So if you want to learn more, I'd encourage you to check out these books. There's lots of other books on the topic. Definitely check out Tom's talk there.
Scott,
Yes?
what was the third book? I couldn't see the title.
It is Creative Confidence. I can't remember the name of the guys that wrote it. It's the IDEO guys. And this is a book, if you've talked about design thinking or read about it, this is one of the books that talks a lot about design thinking. And there are other sessions, as I said, today that will talk about design thinking, and I'm assuming some of this prototyping idea and things like that. Okay, so once you reach a certain point of clarity, so we've moved up in our cone of uncertainty, let's say greater than 50%, and that's a swag on my part, right? I don't know where the sweet spot is, but there's some point where you know more than you don't know, and you kind of feel that. A point where you say, okay, I could actually begin to put together a list of features, and I feel like I could actually begin to start creating a backlog. At that point, you're probably ready to move into more of an Agile inception. And really, an Agile inception is much like release planning exercises that you've done before. I would call it a structured but accelerated planning process that drives towards enough data to actually extrapolate estimates. Again, we're in the scary zone there. This is a horrible slide for you. It'll be better when you look at it in a PDF and you can use it as a reference point. But if you look at some of the things on the left, you will notice very familiar outcomes to a standard release planning event. Planning goals, outputs, all those kinds of things. But our goal is that we end up with enough data where we can start to estimate things. We're going to summarize our story points. We're going to talk about an estimated velocity, and then we're going to extrapolate those things. And if the business wants it, we actually often extrapolate an estimated budget for the MVP. Sometimes we'll create options where we'll say door number 1, door number 2, door number 3. And business owners love that because they can make decisions of if we do this, it'll cost us this, but if we do this, the cost changes, but we might get to market 6 months earlier or something like that. Or we're cost sensitive. We can stand to have the project delayed by 3 months if we can save half of the price, something like that. We find that going through this process often also seems to create a more solid definition of MVP. And I think that that is because the whole team is participating in the process. So sometimes, at least in my experience, with MVPs, you have somebody from the business, product side or whatever, that has said, okay, I know this space and this is the absolute minimum viable product. Now, that may be true, but it's interesting when you come in and you start to negotiate and you realize that, well, you know, that feature is really complicated and it's going to be hard to do and it's going to cost a lot of money. But if we can negotiate about this and maybe build it this way, which gets you 80% of what you're looking for, this is easy. We can do that way faster than we can do this. Sometimes those conversations don't happen, and this Inception experience tends to promote those kinds of conversations. So what we found is you come out of this with an MVP that the entire team has rallied around and accepted. And I think that's, Chad, that's going to be one of your points, is that we came away and the team was really aligned and ready to go. So let's dive into the details of how this actually works. And again, this is the fire hose part, so ride along with me here. This is typically a 2-day event. Typically the entire Agile team should be there. So your product owner, your Scrum Masters, your devs, your QAs. And again, we're talking about a team, so don't think like big room planning where, oh my gosh, we're going to have 100. No, this is, you know, probably 12 to 20 people, and 20 is on the large side. But you want all of your Agile team there, and then if the backlog is, if the product is something new so that the backlog can't really be represented by the product owner, you need somebody there from the business. The bottom line is you need somebody that can describe the value that you're trying to create, not just the thing, but what does the user really need? What is the value we're trying to create? And then they also need to be able to prioritize the options, because you're getting the MVP, so they need to describe the value and then say, okay, how small can we shave that for this first release? If you've got UX people that have done prototyping, or if you have teams that were doing some of that lean prototyping, get somebody from those teams there. Bring your models and bring your mock-ups in. If it's a legacy product, you need somebody that can do a demo for the whole team. A lot of times, as a consulting company, we're coming in and we're very unfamiliar with the products. So one of the most key points for us to get started is pulling the team together and having someone give us a demo of what it is that we're iterating from. But it's amazing how many people from the client often haven't seen a demo like that, and you'll hear things like, whoa, I never knew it did that. So even if you're building a legacy product, it's great to have those. Preparation. If you can get documentation for your initiatives and features, it says if possible, but that is really helpful. This is an accelerated process. We're trying to do this exercise in 2 days. So you need to be ready and you need to have your ducks in a row, so to speak. Now this doesn't mean that you're down in the weeds with lots of artifacts and lots of spec sheets and everything. No, actually that's bad. But you need a clear definition of your initiatives and features if at all possible. And this assumes a taxonomy similar to SAFe, initiative, feature, and story. So if you're using a different taxonomy, feel free to adjust that. Typically, as I've said, it's a 2-day session. You're going to want a good room to work in. You'll need a good space that can accommodate people. Don't try to cram 20 people into a little tiny room. I've seen it. It's hard. Everybody's miserable. Make sure the AC works. Make sure you've got a good projector. True story. I've been in small rooms with no AC and nobody has fun, and you really don't get a lot done either. Standard release planning materials, Post-its, Sharpies, those kinds of things. If this is a simple one, you probably know this, but if you're working with a team that doesn't know each other, name tags are great. Anything to make the team move quickly and accelerate the process. This is a big one. Now, there's a list of posters here. In the PDF, there's some examples of what these posters look like. A lot of these posters are probably ones that you could draw yourself. If not, when you read them on the next page, you'll say, oh yeah, I know what that is. But a key point that I would say here is set up the room early. In fact, I had grand visions of actually making all these posters and putting them on the walls, and then I decided that I probably didn't have enough lead time to do that. But when we've done that, in fact, this is from the event that we did at Lumeris about a month ago. We came in and the room was empty. There were actually pictures on that wall there. We took the pictures down and we started putting our posters up and put them around the room. This is Dean, our Agile coach that led the engagement. And so anything that you can do to prepare the room ahead of time will help accelerate. I had the opportunity to attend a seminar that Jean Tabeka did in Washington, D.C. about setting up a room. And she was passionate about that, and it makes such a difference when you can come early and be prepared. I mean, that's kind of meeting prep 101, and yet it's good to be reminded of it. So I'm not going to walk through all of this. This is in the PDF. But if you've done safe PI planning, you'll notice a lot of similarities here. We're doing very much the same things, and we're almost doing it on a similar schedule. The difference is, instead of big room, we're actually following that same accelerated kind of a mindset, but with a smaller team. So some key principles that you're going to want to work towards. Build relationships, create conversation. That's what's going to make this effective. You will need to coach teams with less Agile maturity. That's kind of a given. But with a team that knows Agile, you could probably jump into this exercise and run with it. There's an interesting dynamic that we've seen happen here. At a certain point, especially a well-formed Agile team, but many teams that are even just new to this idea, at a certain point, the team will naturally start to take over and run the meeting. It's a fascinating, magical moment. And what's happening is as they start to get involved and the conversation is through the entire room, they'll just start solving things. They'll just start walking through the outputs, and all you have to do as a facilitator is just kind of guide them, help keep them on track. So that's important. Sometimes as a Scrum Master, it's scary, right? Because you're like, I'm losing the room. But don't fight it. Let them do it, and then you can begin to even step back and let them self-form in terms of maybe they want to negotiate on how long they want to spend on things and stuff like that. So this is a loose schedule, and you need to stay flexible. It's good for both of these days to try to have a short lunch. So pizza or sandwiches are your friend there. And I think we did pizza one day and we did Korean barbecue the next or something like that. Yeah. But the idea is, keep people engaged. People do need to step back and check email and things like that. But you want to facilitate a rapid schedule. Day number 2, again, similar to SAFE, we're going to come back the next morning and we're going to talk about risks and dependencies that we've uncovered. If you're familiar with SAFE, you're familiar with the Rome concept. If not, you can look that up. But we want to go through, finish up the story mapping. So basically the way this works is I've got lots of sheets on my walls. I'm going to put my initiatives at the top of sheets. And if you color code, it will work well. So if, let's say, your initiatives are purple, and then you put features in green, and you put your features under an initiative. And often you might have a sheet, and you would say, okay, this sheet is this initiative with 3 features. Or if the features are large, you might have to split them across sheets. And then underneath that, let's say in yellow Post-its, you're going to put stories. So by the time you come in on day 2, the team has started to put, they're creating their own stories, they're putting stories under the features and initiatives. You've got conversations going in real time with the product folks because they're having to come up with these stories and they're checking things, so things are flowing well. You come in that next day and you're probably going to need to spend some more time on that because everybody's thought about it overnight, they've got good ideas, they realize the gaps and things that they missed. When you get to a point where the momentum slows down and you feel like you've got most of the things storied out, then you actually want to move to a rapid story point estimation process. Sometimes this is a good thing to do over lunch. Lunch usually happens about after you've done those first couple of steps. There's lots of ways that you can do story point estimation. I'm not here to teach you that. One that we have done that seems to work well is you take all the stories off the walls, and I would recommend that you put like a feature key. So F1 is this feature, F2 is this feature, F3 is this feature. Stories under F1, put a little F1 in them. They'll be yellow or something so that you know that they're stories. And hopefully they've been t-shirt sized, which is good to do while you're creating the stories. Then you put them on a table in t-shirt sizes, small, medium, and large. So you've got 3 piles. And then you subdivide the smalls into small and extra small. You subdivide the larges into large and extra large. And then you do that a couple more times. You break the extra larges into XL and XXL. And then you break the XXLs into XXLs and giants, okay? At that point, you've got 7 piles, and often if you look at the extra smalls, they're going to be about 1 point. I don't know why that is, but that's often about how that works. You can check that and negotiate that if you need to, but then if you just assign numbers 1, 2, 3, and on up in a Fibonacci series, that's a starting point. Now, I'm not saying we assign that. You then have the team come up, and that gives them a concrete way to start negotiating, and it saves a lot of time. And so at that point, the team begins to negotiate, and they will hit a sweet spot where they'll say, yeah, that feels about right. At that point, you've got your stories pointed, and you've done that very quickly. Then you also want to talk about estimated velocity of the team. I know that that's a black art, but there are others that have said, look, simplify it, right? I think SAFE says, what is it? For every full-time developer and tester, you do 8 points, and then you subtract any vacation and holidays. We know that's a swag, right? But it at least gives us a baseline, a place to start. And the team, again, is involved in this, so they can negotiate about this. Once you get the stories pointed, you can start to compile that data. Now, we've created some accelerators and spreadsheets and things like that at Veracity, but this is simple math. Basically, you're going to take, here's an example of all your stories mapped out. You can see I've got purple is the initiative on each one of those big sheets. Blue is the feature, yellow is the stories, and they've been pointed. You're going to take that, put them into a spreadsheet with the story, or the feature of the story, and then the points. You're going to tally up each feature, and then you're going to compile that into a sheet. So now you've got a total estimated number of story points for the MVP. One thing I didn't mention, as you're going through this, you're constantly negotiating and prioritizing. We often recommend Moscow prioritization, must, should, could, and won't kind of a thing, but use whatever tool works for you. But hopefully by the time you get to this, the team has already started to firm up around the definition of MVP. And at this point, you're now beginning to calculate this. And so if you take your estimated team velocity and divide that out over the story points, suddenly you begin to see, okay, this is going to take about so many sprints, about so long. Now, we're not done with it yet. We don't just say, great, we're done, ship it, send this to product, and here's your estimate, and we're golden. What we do is we actually put this up, and then we have a session with the team. And some people in the room freak out. Some people in the room go, yeah, we got this. But there's this really great negotiation time where the team starts to look at it, and it's amazing. Some of the skeptics that have been skeptical and fearful through this whole process of this is a bad idea, this is a bad idea, this is a bad idea, they see this and they go, wait, actually, yeah, that feels about right. And so it's interesting because we're using standard Agile tools, and all we're doing is just kind of summing and compiling. So this isn't like rocket science at the end of the day. But it gives a concrete way for the team to start to negotiate. And you can also say, well, what if we overestimated our velocity? Let's copy this tab to another tab in our spreadsheet and change that. And then you can begin to have a couple options of like, well, so if we overestimate it, it's actually going to take a little bit longer or shorter. Or, well, you know, there's this one developer over here, and she is a subject matter expert in such and such. if we could just add her to the team, we think we can probably accelerate on this feature. And so, 10 minutes? Wow, okay, I gotta go really fast. Anyway, you guys get the idea. So I'm gonna call Chad up at this point, and this will hopefully be really valuable to you. So, Chad, I will let you introduce yourself.
That's me. Yeah, in the interest of getting started, you can read this, I'm sure, on the PDF. But I do want to talk a little bit about the Agile journey at Lumeris. In September of 2016, I came to Lumeris and they said that they wanted to try the Agile thing, and then they said they were a little bit Agile. And we came in, and at the same time, Veracity had been on site for a few months, and they were doing an analysis of our business processes and our delivery model. And we both came to the same conclusion that we were nowhere near being Agile. So over the past 15 months or so, we've done a lot of things. We had no Agile teams in September of 2016. Now we have 30 Agile teams. We had no SDLC that was aligned with Agile practices and principles, and now we have an SDLC that's aligned. We've implemented the Scaled Agile framework. We're calling it training wheels. It's something that we want to do so that we can get the organization aligned as to how to do Agile properly and how to be Agile. And Veracity's really been a great partner for us in our transformation. So, I just want to spend a couple of minutes talking about what Inception did for us. When Scott and I first talked about this concept of Inception, I thought he was talking about a dream inside a dream inside a dream. And I didn't know if I wanted to go there. I didn't know if I was prepared for that. But as he walked me through it, I said, wow, that sounds really familiar. This is what I've done in organizations in the past. We called it release planning or sprint zero. So when he walked me through the process, it was really, really familiar and really comfortable for me. And then when I came in on day one and Dean and Scott had the room set up, I thought, wow, they've really improved on this process that was fairly nebulous in the past. We had desired goals. We wanted to figure out what the features were for a given MVP and how to get to those features, what the risks were, what our dependencies were, what our timeline was supposed to be. But they really did a great job in structuring this. And when you walk in, that visual that you see when you walk into that room and the preparation, like Scott said, is key. Preparing that room for all of the players to walk into the room and be able to see really the desired outcomes are already on the wall. So you don't have anything filled in yet, but you've got a checklist of things, and you look and it's visible. And it was really, really cool to see that. So when everybody walked in, they immediately got this sense of comfort that this is not just going to be some place where we're going to be spending 2 days trying to figure out what we're trying to accomplish. There is a structured approach to this, and having that visually represented across the room was fantastic. Dean, the facilitator, did a great job of telling them. You saw the checklist that Scott put up there. That was the first thing that Dean showed the audience or showed the crowd. So you had this checklist of items that they expected to get done. And I thought, man, that seems really overwhelming to try to do in 2 days. It turned out it took about 2.5 days, about a half day longer than we had hoped it would take, but it was really good. So one of the successful points, as Scott mentioned earlier, was that alignment. So he said have a room of about 20. We had a room of about 30
At
to
times,
35.
yeah. That's why it took 2.5 days.
It was a big crowd. I think there was probably too many people. But what was really cool is that we had everybody who cared about the product was in the room. Everybody who cared about the product was in the room. From everywhere from the business, the VPs on the business side, all the way to the developers, the architect, the product representatives. Everybody in the room cared about this product. And so when they left the room, everybody understood what the expectations were. And this is really one of the challenges in an Agile organization is managing expectations and kind of, like Gil said, trying to shift that mindset, shift the values and beliefs. And that really, I saw that happen over the course of a couple of days in this room, where business came in and they were skeptical, the team came in and they were skeptical, but when they left that room after 2.5 days, everybody was aligned, they had built trust, they had aligned on the expectations, and the developers knew what the path was, And the product owners in the business understood through those conversations, they gained confidence in the team to be able to deliver that MVP. And they're moving along at a rapid clip now. And so that's basically the gist of it. Did you want to?
No, that's great. I know we're kind of short on time. How about a question? So when you and I talked, like you said, you were a bit skeptical. What would you say are the core differences from what we did and traditional experiences that you've had?
Well, I would say definitely the structure and the visibility was a key to that. The specific desired outcomes, being able to put everything up on these boards. We had done this before in previous engagements and at Scottrade. And at Numeris. I was at Scottrade in a previous life. And I did it at Scottrade as well. But we had done this before, but it didn't have quite the concrete outcomes that we showed through Veracity's inception.
As an Agilist, how do you feel about the estimation part?
I'm skeptical.
Freak you out?
Yeah, and this is an ongoing conversation. I remain skeptical. I think that the teams have a tendency to be overconfident in their estimation when they're in the room, and product management tends to be a little bit more skeptical, a little bit more pessimistic about that estimation. But again, setting those expectations is key, and being able to have a conversation that this is an initial estimate and this is not a work breakdown structure that we're trying to get to is really, really important to say. We're leaving this room with an understanding that this is an estimate. It's not a plan, it's not a target, it's an estimate. And in a real world example, just the other day, the director of that technology group came to me and said, they're one sprint in and they got 0 story points out of the first sprint. So can we break up the stories, give them credit for the half work they got done, and then move the rest of the stuff into the next sprint and give them credit for that? I said, no, absolutely not. We need to make sure that we go back to the business and let them know that a 0-point first sprint is not uncommon. And that there's a lot of discovery that's done, and there's a lot of things that have to happen as a result of that, but you have to continue that conversation after the inception. So you walk out of that room, and you can't break that relationship that you've had with your business and with your product managers.
Okay. I asked you any closing thoughts. You said you made something up. So any closing thoughts?
Oh, I forgot I said that.
It's all right.
Well, what I will say is every organization has their own way of doing things as far as sprint zero or getting started with product management. But what's really, really key for me is that alignment between all of the people who care. That's all your stakeholders. And stakeholders, you really have to determine what that means. So if you do nothing else, even if you don't have anything on the walls, if you do nothing else going forward, get all of the people who care in the same room at the same time until you have a common understanding of what it is that needs to be done and how it is that you're going to accomplish it. So that's really my closing thoughts.
That's a perfect close, because I would say that what we're trying to do is accomplish that, and we feel like this just gives you some structure and framework to facilitate that very conversation. And that's what we've seen come out of this, a high level of confidence where at the end of that session of 2.5 days, both the business and the technology were acting as one team, and we're going, we can do this. And I can't give you the details of the project itself, but it is a hard project. There's a lot going on there. So, Chad, thank you very much. Okay, I think we are out of time. I got 1 minute left. So, thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. Again, this is not a silver bullet. We're not saying, ta-da, we've solved the world's problems. We know that we haven't. In fact, as evidenced by that first sprint, right? All is not perfect here. But we've seen this a number of times create amazing alignment, cause a great conversation to happen. So thank you for coming.